Boys, we are back. We are talking some keep trade cut scenarios and hoping for some good internet luck tonight, Zach, after last week's shenanigans. But boys, we're back. Nate, you're back from Mexico, all the way back
Yeah.
home, looking good there with the camera and lighting situation you got going on there. Zach, you're over there snacking, getting off a long day's work. But we're here. We're ready to talk about some things. We got you in the comments. And hey, if you want to know about what to be doing right now in Dynasty, there's a couple ways to do that. You can drop a super chat, get your question answered guaranteed. Hop in the Discord. Another way to do that, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. 24/7 advice. See what we can do for your team, along with the help of the community we have behind us. There are 200 plus people ready, rocking to roll to help your roster get better. So not just us, everybody in there. Nate, how we doing tonight?
We're doing pretty good. Like you said, back from Mexico, I'm feeling refreshed. I was going through my dynasty leagues trying to make some trades the other day. I was actually in Mexico trying to make some trades on the beach. It felt great.
It's quite a flex you have there, Nate. Just trying to make some trades on the beaches of Mexico.
Yeah, it was
Whatever.
nice.
Zach, how are we doing over there?
We're good, man. I did not trust the internet at my house so much so that I'm at someone else's house. So we should be good tonight.
With any luck, I would hope so. But we got Waffle Hauser chiming in, of course, as always. Let's all say bye to Zach before we lose him to the rogue internet they have down there in Florida. It's not much fun down there. Pretty quiet right now for questions coming in. Hey, if you're dropping in, we appreciate you dropping in. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, subscribe so you don't miss a show. Hit that little bell icon as well, and drop some questions. Let us know what you're thinking out there, what you'd like to, questions you'd like to have answered. But with that said, I think we can hop right into it, Nate. If you want to talk about your first keep trade cut scenario, this is one that hits close to home for me. Not because I like him, but because he's on my team. What do you got here?
All right. So we got A.J. Dillon off the back. A.J. Dillon has been around for a while now, and I was not a huge fan of him coming out of the combine, but coming out of scouting, but he killed the combine, ended up getting some good draft capital, and has been a decent member of that backfield for a couple of years now. When it was him and Aaron Jones, they were a nice 1-2 punch. You got the Thunder and the Lightning. Well, it's a different day now in the Green Bay Packers offense and in that backfield. Josh Jacobs was signed to a 4-year deal. We've talked about it at length. It's either a 1 or 2 year deal, most likely. But Josh Jacobs, we've seen him eat a ton of carries when he was with the Raiders. He's a guy that gets a lot of volume. He does a little bit of everything. He's a great pass catcher. That was something he was really, really good at when he was coming out of college, and kind of grew even more once he was in the NFL. Also, hey, they drafted one of my favorite running backs in this draft class, Marshawn Lloyd, who is very explosive and does a little bit of everything as well. And he's already making some heads turn over there in the OTAs and rookie minicamp and things like that. So at this point, and looking at the contract with A.J. Dillon, he was a free agent this year. He signed to a 1-year deal. I believe it was under $1 million too. So there's not a lot of financial compensation, not a lot of financial investment they have in A.J. Dillon right now. He is rostered in 90% of sleeper leagues. So he's basically on most teams. He's not on the waiver wire probably unless it's a small league, maybe an 8-team league or something like that. He's going to have a roster spot in just about every league you're in. He probably deserves a roster spot, but not on your team.
Yeah.
And so at this point, I want to get out on A.J. Dillon before, we just did a podcast where it was players to get on before it was too late. You want to sell these players before the value drops even more. Well, A.J. Dillon's not really relevant enough for me to talk about on the podcast, but here for the live stream, going over these, unclog your roster, A.J. Dillon's a guy that you can go ahead and move on from. At best, if he makes the team, he's the RB3, and that's what it's come to at this point. It's kind of crazy. I don't think his stats have been that bad, but the coordinators and the coaches have said, he's got to make the team. It's not a guaranteed roster spot at this point. So A.J. Dillon, going off of the history, going off of the name, the power that he still has with his name, I'd be trying to move him. Can I get a third? If someone who's paying attention, probably not, but someone who's not, probably. Otherwise, can I get even a fourth or a third next year? I'd be happy with that. I think A.J. Dillon is just going to continue to lose value. I'd go ahead and move out if I can. Maybe a wide receiver that you believe in that's at the bottom of someone else's bench that maybe you can just do a little spot for. I think A.J. Dillon's a player that you can trade right now for a little bit of value because you can get someone that you want to take a dart throw on.
Yeah, I'm looking at his contract right now. So he's 26 years old, 1-year deal. 2.5 million, but only a handful of that is guaranteed, and they could actually save money cutting him after the break. I mean, they are guaranteed to lose $167,000, but they can save $1.25 million, $1.25 million.
There you go.
Enough, ish, whatever.
$250,000.
They we'll get there one way or another, boys, but they could actually save a ton of money cutting him. So honestly, and with that backfield and hearing the buzz of Marshawn Lloyd, I'd not be the least bit surprised to hear that AJ Dillon does not make that roster. Although with what else they have there kicking around, I could see him being an RB3 on that team and being just fine. But I think that's what he is at the end of the day for this team, is the running back 3 and only a 1-year deal. I'd be surprised to see him make it back on this roster next offseason.
Yeah,
it's Lard. Go ahead.
I want to point out, Nick down there, he said, could Green Bay use Dillon at fullback this season? I just want to say, when AJ Dillon was coming out of college, I was like, this guy would be a better fullback than a running back. Now, maybe I was wrong on that, but come full circle.
Yeah, that would be rough. Zach, anything to add here before we move along?
No, I mean 90% rostered is pretty wild, by the way. Just because
too much.
Is he 90% rostered because he used to be Aaron Jones' backup, or is are people not aware of the situation there that's going on in Green Bay? I mean, to me, it's pretty clear that Marshawn Lloyd is the backup running back there, and AJ Dillon at this point is like the RB3. And even then, he was so bad last year when he was the running back for Green Bay. You couldn't really count on him for anything in terms of fantasy. And look, even if he was moved to fullback, he's not upending fullback 1 for 10 years in a row, Kyle Juszczyk. So no point in hanging on to that kind of junk, all right?
Yeah, we got our buddy Caleb chiming in, one of our Discord moderators, and chiming in with AJ Dill on, more like AJ Dill off my roster. I love that very much. And good afternoon or evening coming in from, I'm going to butcher this and I apologize, Don Keys, maybe?
That's what
I apologize. We got Matt English chiming in as well. Yo, what's up, guys? Love the content of the show tonight. Hey, if you want to know players you want to maybe be cutting off your roster, some guys that maybe you're on the fence with, drop them in the comments. Maybe we'll get to them at some point here. I do want to get to this real quick, Zach, before we get to your first cut of the night, or keep trade cut scenario, I should say. I don't want to assume or make assumptions, but I made a 3-way trade in my 14-team Superflex rookie draft. Essentially, I gave the 206 and 406 and received DeAndre Swift and 307. Please tell me this wasn't a bad move. I'm all about this deal. I don't know what we're doing over here in these rookie drafts, but I mean, that's a tough one. Zach, any thoughts to be had on this one? This is a smash deal, good deal to be made here, Marcos.
Yeah, I don't even like DeAndre Swift all that much, but the value is great there. And as we say, and Nate has coined and catchphrase on this channel, we don't hate players, we just hate value. So, yeah, that's a great deal to get DeAndre Swift for what I would account to the 206. Yeah, let somebody else have rookie fever. Let somebody else have that hopium, the coin I've termed that I'm trying to popularize. You have that hopium, I'll take DeAndre.
Yeah, I'm with you there 100%. Maybe Jacoby Myers and Demario Douglas make our list tonight. Maybe some other Patriot wide receivers. Who knows? We're going to move right along here. Zach, what is your first keep trade cut scenario that you got on the docket?
Yeah, I want to go with 3 players that I actually really like no matter what, to make it tough on myself, right? Like, look, we all have tried to use AJ Dillon in the past, but I think we can all realize, like, it's time to cut bait, right? I wanted to go with 3 players that I would have a hard time choosing from. So I'll just go with my first one, and that's A.T. Perry. Look, obviously, you look at his season last year, and there's nothing special about it. Wide receiver, 97, only 60 fantasy points, 12 receptions on 18 targets, 246 yards, but did have 4 touchdowns. So 4 out of his 12 receptions were touchdowns. And you look at his yards per catch, 20.5. So very clearly a downfield target for the New Orleans Saints, and really came into fruition, or really got on the field, I should say, in the second half of that season. You start to look after the bye, which was when we really start to look at rookies, which was what A.T. Perry was last year. And that's when he really got playing time was after the bye. 74% of snaps week 12 after the bye, 61, 62, another 60 and 64% of the snap share at the wide receiver position for the Saints. They were also battling some injuries. Michael Thomas for the 1400th year in a row, missing time for the Saints. And of course, there was some games where Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed missed time as well, so he was able to step on the field. Never saw more than 3 targets in a game. But this wide receiver room outside of Chris Olave is so wide open. I pretty much do feel like Rashid Shaheed is the wide receiver 2. I have so many problems saying that name, by the way. Rashid Shaheed. I can't say that name 5 times fast. Yeah, I have problems with that name. Too many in there. So that wide receiver room is wide open. And like I could list off some of the wide receiver names and we could play a game like, hey, is this a real wide receiver or not? And you would fail because there's so many just random names at the wide receiver position for the Saints. So look, there is opportunity there. They did sign Cedric Wilson in the offseason to a 2-year deal. But when I'm looking at these dart throw players, the players that I'm debating keeping at the end of my roster, I ask myself, is there opportunity for this player? And there is, because it's a pretty open wide receiver room, albeit I don't know how good that situation is. Now, look, in the offseason, they moved off their offensive coordinator, brought in Kubiak from San Francisco. I mean, you're hearing a lot about Taysom Hill, by the way, which is just so gross. It's so gross. Why do we have to keep doing this? They even changed offensive coordinators, and still the May and June offseason news about the Saints is Taysom Hill. It's just disgusting. But A.T. Perry, there is opportunity there for him to play, but I just don't know what his possible ceiling even could be. And so when you see the other names on my list, you'll see why A.T. Perry for me is a cut candidate. Yes, there is opportunity there, but I also just don't know what this offense is doing. There's so many mouths to feed. I still believe in Juwan Johnson, by the way. Juwan Johnson was a top 5 tight end last year for the fantasy football playoffs. He was injured a lot last year. When he was on the field, he was a top 5 tight end. Still believe in him. Apparently, the Saints still believe in Taysom Hill. Chris Olave is there. I do think Kendra Miller is more a part of this offense. So I just don't really think that there's a very high ceiling for A.T. Perry. And for that reason, boys, of the names that I picked out, which were 3 guys that I still really like, I just had to have A.T. Perry as a cut candidate for me.
That's tough. It's tough.
Neat.
I like A.T. Perry. Pulled up his stats. You know, he played in 8 games at the end of the season where he had at least 10 snaps or more. And in those 8 games, he had only 12 catches, but he did have 20.6 yards, 20.5 yards per reception. So he actually ended up with 246 yards in 8 games. So let's say that's half a season. If we extrapolate that to a full season, you're talking about a guy with 500 yards his rookie year. You know, he obviously didn't do that, but there is some promise over those last 8 games. Not a high volume, but when he was targeted, I mean, his ADOT, what was his ADOT? His 17.3. They need a big downfield guy. He's 6'3", 205. I like his role in this offense. I'm still interested in A.T. Perry. Especially after some kind of flash your rookie year, I'm not going to cut you right away.
Yeah, and you can still put him on a taxi squad in most leagues,
Yeah.
so hard to justify a cut, but I couldn't really fault anybody if I saw anybody cut him for what that's worth. So moving along here, we got some questions in the comments. Marcos, Jelani Woods to the moon. I don't know why, but maybe we'll talk about that a little later.
Hey.
Some other Colts, who knows? But let's see. I think we talked about this one possibly before. Looking at dumping Rondale Moore and or Tyler Boyd. Can't seem to trade them. Waiver ads available. Blake Watson, Amani Bailey, Bub Means, whatever you want to call them. Johnny Wilson, Jared Wiley, and Jalen Tolbert. The only one of these I would be pretty willing to cut Rondale Moore, I think. Tyler Boyd, I'm somewhat curious to see what he does in that offense and how he slots in. But Jared Wiley is definitely somebody I'm interested in picking up off waivers out of that grouping. Either of those guys you'd cut, any of those guys you'd pick up?
I'd cut Rondale. I'm also interested in Tyler Boyd. And I like Jared Wiley. I think last time we had a live stream and I was on here and we did keep trade cut, I talked about Jalen Tolbert. He's a wide receiver 3 on the team right now, and the Cowboys led the league in passing attempts last year. So They didn't bring anybody in. They don't seem like they're going to do it anytime. I'm kind of back in on Jalen Tolbert cautiously, though, because I don't want my heart to get broke again.
Yep. I agree with Nate. I'm also I'd be making a waiver play at Jalen Tolbert just because, as Nate said, when I'm looking at these kinds of players, I'm looking at opportunity. And Jalen Tolbert has the best opportunity out of any of those players that you mentioned there. And we can do the backup tight end to Travis Kelce thing for the 14th year in a row. But I'm not. I'm done with that. I'm not investing in the Noah Grays and the whatever backup tight end that the Chiefs have. Jalen Tolbert has a direct line to opportunity, as Nate mentioned. So for that reason, I definitely go with Jalen Tolbert.
I'd go with Jared Wiley, but that's just me. I think he's a heck of a lot better than Noah Gray is or ever has been. Corey Nichols chiming in here, I believe one of our patrons. Any hope for Cedric Tillman to do anything, or do we toss him to make some room? I believe I made a cut of Cedric Tillman somewhere along the way this offseason. That room is just getting so crowded, and another guy who is trending towards being the 4th or 5th target at best, kind of in that same bucket with Elijah Moore of just what are we hoping for with these guys? And yes, maybe long-term things open up, but the longer players just don't produce. They don't develop really either. So if he's not producing, if he's not earning targets, that might be all that you need to know about Cedric Tillman. He's worth hold, another taxi squad player. Just a thought, but go ahead, Nate.
You know who had 8 targets in the Browns playoff game?
I do know, but you're going to tell me because I can't think of the name.
David Bell. So
yes.
if we're trying to go after the wide receiver 5 for the Browns, I'd take Bell over Tillman.
Oh man, I certainly wouldn't. Zach, your thoughts on this one? Any hope for Cedric Tillman?
Not really. I mean, you can read the sleeper report that's like Cedric Tillman to be featured, but yeah, I mean, I'm definitely off the May and June. Yeah, right. I'm definitely off the May and June sleeper news. So yeah, I mean, unless it's a deeper league, if you can get someone else off the waiver wires, I probably do.
Yeah, and then Caleb, give me the strength to cut Sean Tucker, and Caleb, I'd be making that bet 100%. I think he's had his chance personally, being a UDFA last year, getting some work, but being a healthy scratch, quote unquote, healthy scratch for the most part of the season. Another thing you don't want to see happen to rookies is healthy scratches. So I would not be super confident in that, but hey, another guy that there's that taxi squad caveat.
Yep. Who
knows? So with that said, I will get on into my first cut of the day, and that's the man on the thumbnail, boys. Miles Sanders, 88% rostered, and this is one that is just at the precipice of what the heck do you do with this guy, because there's a decent enough chance he was well invested in at some point, unless you started up this year, maybe last year, but even then he was coming off his best season that he ever had before he was picked up by the Panthers. But, when I'm doing these, I ask the question first, do I want this guy on my team? Do I want him anywhere near my roster? No. Why not becomes the question. Incredibly inefficient last year, as I put a typo on the page saying he was efficient last year. Not the case. Out of 41 qualifying running backs with at least 129 attempts last year, he averaged the 3rd least yards per carry and the 10th worst yards per carry after contact. Now he's on a depth chart that features newly minted, quote-unquote, healthy running back Jonathan Brooks, and Chuba Hubbard is still there as well, who was not very efficient in his own right last year, but more efficient than Miles Sanders. And when you have multiple backs in a backfield, that are getting decent enough reps, I'm always curious to see who performs better, because that's the ultimate question of, like, if you compare these two, they have the same line in front of them, they have the same quarterback. Yes, they might be running some different plays and schemes and whatever, but if one's doing better with the same system than the other one, there's something wrong there. But before his final year in Philly, as I mentioned, where he had an incredible season, he was on a downward trend and in just about every category. Then he puts up this anomaly year, and shocker, he turns back into a pumpkin. I don't want him. So then the question becomes, can I trade him? And recent trades via Fantasy Calc suggest I can move him plus a 4th or 5th for a 3rd or 4th. And I tell you what, fellas, if I can do that, see you later. I can't hit send fast enough. But for some reason, there still seems to be some value on him. Maybe as a handcuff piece. Some people are just trying to secure a piece, whatever the case is. But I'm at the point of I'm pretty much willing to sell at all costs, whatever I can get rookie picks wise. But I'm expecting that I'm very possibly going to have to cut him. Nate, you touched on the podcast. He's stuck there. You know, there is no wiggle room on his contract where he's going to be able to be a fresh cut anytime soon. Mike brought up the concept. Maybe he gets traded. Good God, why would anybody want to buy this guy? I can't fathom. But anything else to add here, boy? Yeah, in 2027, something along those lines. I don't know. But anything else to add on this one, boys, before we move along, maybe answer some questions here?
No.
I mean, maybe like Mike mentioned on the pod, he gets traded. And look, the trade would have to be for absolutely nothing, like a 7th round pick. And the Panthers would have to eat a significant chunk of that contract, which they would still save a little bit of money. So that'd be the incentive for them to do it. But as somebody who has a share of Miles Sanders that he can't get rid of, I am stuck in this, like, don't know what to do phase, hope it works itself out in training camp phase, or hope that he gets traded. And the reason why I can't seem to move off of him is because I did buy him for a 1st round pick. Now, caveat is I won a championship in that league 2 years in a row. Okay. So I did move a late 1st round pick for Miles Sanders after he signed with Carolina, but I'm stuck, man. I am the person you are talking to right now, Bob, because I am just hoping and praying for a better situation for Miles Sanders one way or the other.
Fair enough, Zach. I don't know if that's coming. Maybe he has a good pop-off week when we're still waiting for Brooks to get all the way back, and maybe you can sell on some hopium at that point in the season, but I would not count on it. We got Brennan Farr chiming in here. Is Tyquon Thornton and or DPJ droppable? Nate, I think you have something to say about that. What's your next talking point here?
Yeah, my next talking point is Tyquon Thornton, who is owned in 37% of sleeper leagues, and also Kayshon Boutte, who's owned in 35% of sleeper leagues. I noticed these guys on the show sheet kind of near each other, so I put them together. 2 Patriots wide receivers owned about the same, and you can cut both of them. You've heard this week some Tyquon Thornton hype. I saw some tweets today. It's like, oh, he's making plays, he's catching everything. That's great. He has 91 yards last year. He had 247 the year before that, but only 22 targets last year, 7 yards per reception. I mean, Tyquon Thornton, he's not it. Now they've gone and they got Polk, they got Baker. Demario Douglas is still there, who I like quite a bit. So they have their top 3 really well solidified. And then you also have Juju Smith-Schuster there, who I know there is probably a lot of negative feelings towards Juju, and I get it. But it's only been 1 bad year, so I'm not out on Juju yet, as unlucky as I am to have a couple shares. I'm not cutting him just yet. But Tyquon Thornton, Kayshon Boutte, you're talking about the wide receiver 5 and 6 at best on a team with a rookie quarterback and a lot of wide receiver competition. I don't think either one of these guys are going to be relevant at any point this season or anytime season coming on, especially not on the Patriots. I don't think these guys, coming out as prospects, I did not like either of these guys. Thornton was wildly overdrafted, and Boutte fell from where many people had him the season before the draft because of issues himself. So these are 2 players who have been trending downward really since for the last 2 years, both of them. So this is the time to cut. You don't need to worry about Tyquon Thornton. You don't need to worry about Kayshon Boutte. I don't suspect either one of these guys are going to come back and bite you in the butt for dropping them. Go ahead and move on with your life. There's new rookies this year, day 3 rookies that I would rather have. I would rather have Jordan Whittington, wide receiver for Texas that went over to the Rams. They moved Skronik to the Texans, and Whittington he's a scrappy player. He's done everything that's always been asked of him when he played at Texas, and he has good hands. He's not going to be an incredible player, but I think he might have a spot there with the Rams as like their wide receiver 4. So I'd rather go after a guy like Jordan Whittington, who was a late round pick this year, than hold on to Tyquon Thornton or Kayshon Boutte.
Fair enough. Zach, anything to add on here?
How dare you besmirch Tutu Atwell or Demarcus Robinson?
Hey, I got Demarcus Robinson shares. I'm into him.
Well, then Jordan Whittington can't take his spot. So
You might be able to take Tutu Atwell's spot.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, I totally agree with Nate. Got nothing to add here. I mean, I saw the same reports today, and I was just like, nah, I'm not falling for it. No way. No way.
Not today, Satan.
No way. No way. I mean, there's no way that he moves past the depth chart, that moves past the two rookies they drafted, Jalen Polk, Javon Baker, and also Demario Douglas. I just don't see any way. He'd have to have the training camp of all training camps. I mean, as a matter of fact, Tyquon Thornton could be a actual cut candidate for the Patriots. So we'd have to see. But I'm with Nate. Totally agree. Don't buy the hype. Move off. It's time to cut.
And we have to say thank you to Mr. 12 chiming in with a beautiful super chat here. Thank you so much. And hey, if you want to support the brand, support this team, help this channel grow, great way to do that. Chipping in a super chat here. Guaranteed question answered. Mr. 12 here chiming in with the question, does Keaton Mitchell make any noise coming off the injury, or would you rather have Roschon Ali? This is a tough spot with Derrick Henry obviously coming to town. They still have Justice Hill there, who still keeps getting work. But, you know, Nate, you're the resident Ravens fan.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about this one?
All right. I love Keaton Mitchell. Love what he did last year. He was so explosive. I thought, hey, they found a good running back in Keaton Mitchell. But he tore his ACL, and it sounds like there was also likely other damage in his knee when he had that injury. It was at the very end of the season. Frankly, from what I've heard from the team, from what I've heard from injury analysts that I trust, like Jeff Mueller on Twitter, I don't expect Keaton Mitchell to really have any impact or production this year. If he comes back at all, it's going to be like week 14 or something like that. Maybe he gets a couple runs in there. But if you have Keaton Mitchell on your team, you're not expecting anything out of him until 2025, which is a pretty optimistic expectation for a UDFA, who only had a small sample size, as good as it was, a small sample size, and a team that's looking to win a championship and isn't just going to hang on to UDFA, especially, if they don't have room for him. They drafted Roschon Ali, who, I didn't necessarily love at first, but I have quickly grown to appreciate his skill set and how it fits with the Ravens. Derrick Henry's there on a 2-year deal. And Justice Hill, as much as he probably bothers fantasy managers, Justice Hill is a really good running back who's going to be on this team for a while. He's one of their best special teamers in the past. He's done everything that's been asked of him over the past couple of years and gotten more volume throughout. So this I would much rather have Roschon Ali. Give me the guy who's actually going to play this year, have opportunity to make some noise this year. If at the end of the season Ali still has not done anything, you can go after Keaton Mitchell. I don't think he'll be expensive. I don't know what Keaton Mitchell is going for currently, but if you have him, I would highly recommend you trade him right now. I don't know if you can get a third for him. On Keep Trade Cut, he's still like way too highly ranked, but I don't think that's legit. So Keaton Mitchell, I'd be looking to move off of him. I don't think he's going to be doing anything anytime soon, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think if you can burn a taxi squad slot, that's about the best I could, have conviction for if you have room. But yeah, if I have offers knocking on my door for a 3rd-round pick, like you kind of alluded to, see you later. Like I do not have near that much conviction for Keaton Mitchell. Zach, anything to add here before we move along?
Yeah, if you're still holding on to Keaton Mitchell, hoping for something, you did not see the injury. It was so gross. I mean, hyperextension to the max without it like being a compound fracture. It was such a gross ACL injury. To me, that was like worse than Nick Chubb because it just doesn't bend that way. And I'm again with Nate. Stop doing this to me, Nate. Like, damn it, we're not supposed to agree on everything. Man, I'll be honest with you. Unless he's got some kind of Adrian Peterson genes, why would you even bring him back? Like, that was such a devastating injury. To me, they might not, and they didn't do this with J.K. Dobbins. They might not tell us the full extent of the injury, but that was a very severe injury. So I'd be surprised if he even came back week 14. Like, bravo, man. I would literally applaud Keaton Mitchell if he did that. So it was a devastating injury. If you haven't seen it, don't watch it. It's so gross. But I'm with Nate. I would rather have Ali here. I was actually a fan of Ali. Not a big fan or anything like that, but I was like, oh, interesting fit for the Ravens and Ali. I think there's like a spot for him, depending on, Derrick Henry and the usage for him. And of course, like you said, Justice Hill is still there. So no, I just don't think that you're going to get anything out of Keaton Mitchell this year.
Yeah, I think for sure too. And I didn't address this, but I should have. I missed the direction of the question. I too would probably lean having a shot at Ali just for having some shot at doing something this year, like you guys have alluded to. Keaton Mitchell probably going to be for the most part, a non-factor this year. So give me the shot on Ali, who had pretty good production, albeit at Marshall, which is always somewhat of a concern at low strength of schedule schools. And somewhat of a, sus kind of injury history, kind of, left football for a little bit for personal reasons. Not that we like to judge on that, but for the people out there, just throwing it out there that, hey, he missed some time, not just due to injury, but also for personal reasons, and was away from the game of football for a while. However you want to take that is up to you. So thank you very much, Mr. 12, #bars. Appreciate the heck out of you, and appreciate the heck out of Waffle Houser as well. Just wanted to say he loves Jacoby Myers.
Me too.
And we love Waffle Houser. One I do want to get to, the question here. We talked about Burks a couple weeks back on the same show. But Jerry Jeudy, you cannot cut. A guy who just got, a 3-year deal, 50-some million. A guy we probably don't want on our roster again.
You're probably stuck with him if you have him.
Yeah, until he does something, which, hey, we've been banging this drum for Jerry Jeudy finally waiting to do something for God knows how long. But at this point in time, they invested in the guy, and somebody needs to take that wide receiver 1 torch from Amari Cooper at some point. I'm not saying it's going to be Jerry Jeudy. I'm not saying it's going to be this year, but at some point that torch has to be passed, and that might be up to the quarterback, which we also don't like. So the Browns offense is just a mess, and I don't want any part of it at this point.
Yeah.
So,
one more thing on the Browns offense. They didn't even draft a running back, and they got Nick Chubb coming off this ACL injury.
He'll be fine. He'll be fine.
I mean, I think
him and Jerome
okay,
Ford. Him and Jerome Ford. He'll be fine.
I'd be buying some insurance if I was them.
Well, they did go out and sign Donta Foreman.
Oh,
Zack with the haymaker.
Oh, watch out.
Fair enough, Zach. All right, get on into your second one here, your second keep, trade, cut scenario. What do you got for us? Talk about it.
Okay, so again, I wanted 3 players that I actually, did want to roster, and I did want to pick a keep, a trade, and a cut. So for me, I'm going to go with my guy who's a trade. And if you're looking at the show sheet, you're probably starting to do a process of elimination and can see where things are going. So yeah, this is going to be interesting. Chris Rodriguez, 64% rostered in our sleeper leagues. Right now kind of slots in as the RB3 over in Washington. And look, if you're somebody that has Chris Rodriguez, or you bought Chris Rodriguez in the offseason, don't let that dismay you from keeping Chris Rodriguez, okay? Because it's Austin Eckler. He's going to get hurt. Brian Robinson, I think Brian Robinson is very much a player that every year will miss 3 to 5 games. It happened last year at the end of the season. He was on a seasonal trajectory to be like a top 8 RB last year, and ended up with a hamstring injury that kept him out the final week, couple weeks of the season. And then lo and behold, we kind of did get to see Chris Rodriguez make a little bit of noise before he suffered an injury of his own towards the end of the season. I think it was week 16, which, by the way, was your fantasy playoffs. Chris Rodriguez was the RB8, 58 yards on 10 carries and 2 touchdowns and 1 catch for 7 yards. So very much was a very good running back for that 1 week. But they go out in the offseason, they sign Austin Eckler, and that really pushes down Rodriguez on the depth chart. And I got to say, like I said, I was really interested to see Chris Rodriguez be the RB2, but you're not going to not put Austin Eckler on the field when you go out and sign him in free agency. So it's pretty much a 1-2 attack between Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler. But I do think that Chris Rodriguez will see opportunities when either of those two miss some time. And that's the part for me where, as a more competitive team, I don't want to really wait for that. There will be opportunity, but you're going to have to wait for it to come to your doorstep. And I would rather go out there and trade for a player that can do something for me. Like, look, I know you guys just laughed at it, but to me, Donta Foreman is somebody I'd rather have over Chris Rodriguez at this point because of the unknown of the situation in Cleveland. And Jerome Ford was not very efficient as a running back last year. So Donta Foreman is somebody that I have a couple of shares of in my leagues just as an insurance policy. And it doesn't cost you very much because he's a 28-year-old running back at this point. Chris Rodriguez, 23 years old. He's the RB3 in Washington. I do, like I said, I do think that he comes across opportunity at some point this season. I just don't know when that's going to be. And of course, you're banking for an injury. And so if you're looking at carrying an insurance policy on your roster, I'd rather just go with someone else who has a more direct line to opportunity, like a Donta Foreman, like I said. So I in my list of my keep, trade, cut, Chris Rodriguez was my trade. I don't know how you guys feel about that. And I really do like what we saw out of him last year. And I was excited about him in this offense, but then they went out and signed Austin Eckler.
Nate, would you like to chime in first?
My question is, what can I get for Chris Rodriguez?
Well, I'm laughing. And Bob knows why, probably, because I feel bad about this. And this was before the Austin Eckler news, so maybe we can extrapolate from that. But I was able to sell Chris Rodriguez for the 212.
Oh my gosh!
Again, it was before. I mean, hey, listen, it was in our rewinders.
So
I didn't even want to say who it was to. And again, it was somebody taking a chance before Austin Eckler was there. You can't get that, but can you maybe get a third round pick? I don't know. But I would be looking to move. I would be looking to move him for somebody else, like an insurance policy somewhere else, as opposed to a draft pick.
I'm looking on Dynasty Daddy to see some recent trades that involve Chris Rodriguez. And some idiot traded Demario Douglas away for him, which is incredible. I mean, I would trade Chris Rodriguez for Demario Douglas 8 days of the week.
Oh, yeah.
You can also get Tank Bigsby.
I would do that, Nate.
I would do that too. Yeah. I've heard there's been a lot of news coming out of Jacksonville that, hey, ETN had way too many carries last year, and we need to get somebody else to get the touches. And while Bigsby was not good last year, he's the next man up because they don't have, I don't think Keelan Robinson.
It
was a trade, Chris Rodriguez for Gardner Minshew. That's intriguing.
Sure.
Chris Rodriguez and a third for Jamison Williams.
Oh God,
I'd rather have that.
I guess.
Yeah.
So, by the way, the Jags did bring back Dearness Johnson, so
they did, but he was also really bad last year.
Okay. No, listen, I agree with you. I'd rather have the day 2 running back over the day 3 running back. And I do think that they misappropriated the Tank Bigsby use. And it's very easy to say he wasn't very good or wasn't very efficient, but who's going to be good or efficient when you get 1 or 2 opportunities a game?
Yeah.
That's just like that's not complimenting a player who has a specific skill set and can do certain things that you didn't ask him to do last year. So yes, you can. That's very easy, and to me, that's lazy analysis. I look at the Tank Bigsby situation as, hey, did they put Tank Bigsby in a situation to do what he does best? And to me, that answer was no. So I agree with you. I'd rather have Tank Bigsby easily over Chris Rodriguez.
Yeah, I think too the problem with Chris Rodriguez is the appeal. I feel like most people who are appealed to Chris Rodriguez are just the Brian Robinson manager, because I can't fathom anybody wants or thinks Chris Rodriguez is going to usurp this backfield at any point in time. So I think that maybe limits your pool of who you're dealing with and thus limits your value. So it might be better to just hold at this moment until that situation arises, because I think he would probably be, I guess Austin Eckler could probably take work, but who knows, man? They're not paying Austin Eckler like they're planning on him taking all the work. So yeah, that's a rough one for me, but Zach, I get where you're at. Definitely try to trade him if you can. I had some I wanted to go over here. We talked about this already. I want to cut Sanders for Frank Gore Jr. so bad. And honestly, like, as much as I don't care for the ad of Frank Gore Jr., UDFA, I think Ray Davis is better, but I'm, just whatever you got to do, man. You have my blessing. Like, I'm not gonna, you said it before. I don't think some of these guys are going to bite you in the butt too much if you're cutting guys who have been not great for a long time. Waffle Hauser, I think Ertz has value still. Am I crazy to say so? Last we saw him, he was still earning targets in Arizona. I don't
2
know,
years
man.
ago.
Yeah, I mean, a good minute ago, I think he was there at the start of last year getting some run, but was quickly taken over by Trey McBride, whether due to injury or
He was
whatever. I
hurt to
can't
start last
recall.
year. He had an
Yeah.
ACL
Okay.
injury.
Yeah, he didn't really play at all last year. So the
Yeah.
last time we saw him was
Okay.
like midway through the 2022 season.
Yeah, my concern is always when you see guys hit free agency, like he had the opportunity last year, and just nobody really cared to pick him up. That kind of tells me a little bit. So yeah, I think he's probably cooked, and maybe he gets some run early, but I don't think it lasts long. They got Ben Sinnott down there, so watch out.
He did start last year. He had four top 12, 3 top 12 finishes in the first 4 weeks, and then did suffer an ACL injury.
Oh, okay.
Fair enough. I guess we will move. I keep missing my questions here. There we go. Marcos again. Who steals the wide receiver 1 role in New England? I don't think it's for long, but I think it's Jalen Polk. But I think he's built to be a wide receiver 2 for a team, not a wide receiver 1. So I think at some point, I don't think they have their wide receiver 1 of the future, at least. I like Demario Douglas a good bit as well. Nate, what do you guys think about this one before we roll on into my number 2 cut?
I think the wide receiver 1 this season is Demario Douglas. I love Polk. I like Baker, but they're rookies. I don't know if especially because I don't know if Polk is going to truly separate himself very early on or not. He absolutely could. I love Polk, but Demario Douglas was really efficient last year. He plays a lot in the slot, which should earn a good amount of targets. And I think with his efficiency and if he gets those targets, I think he will probably end up being the wide receiver 1. At worst, the wide receiver 1A and 1B with Polk. But I think Demario Douglas is actually set up for a pretty good year, unless Javon Baker just goes absolutely off.
Which I'm not banking on. Zach, any thoughts here?
How dare you besmirch Kendrick Bourne, Nate?
Oh.
No.
I'm
going to go ahead and besmirch him a little more. Marco's chiming in real quick. Also adding on that he has Demario Douglas, Javon Baker, and KJ Osborne, and just dropped Juju. Kendrick Bourne is on waivers. And my question is, why are we stacking the New England receiver? Like, just go somewhere else. Like, this store is not a good one. It's a 0 on Yelp or whatever rating format you want to play on. I would go elsewhere. But Zach, I cut you off. What do you think about the wide receiver 1 role in New England?
The only thing that I'll add to what you and Nate both said is that we have to do some projecting in this situation, right? Nobody knows. What is the best way to project? Well, let's go back to Drake May in college. Josh Downs was incredibly efficient with and for Drake May. And so who plays the position that Josh Downs played?
Jalen Polk. Yeah.
No. Demario Douglas. So to me, I again, I hate to do it, keep agreeing with Nate, but again, I'm just projecting there. I go, who did Drake May really succeed at North Carolina with, and what position did they play? And for me, that was 2 years ago when Josh Downs was there. That was his go-to target. And when Josh Downs wasn't there, we saw a little bit of, would you say, a regression in Drake May, or he just wasn't as good last year, throwing the ball specifically. So to me, it's the person who plays the same position that Josh Downs did, and that's Demario Douglas in this situation.
Yeah. When I think that Demario Douglas being the wide receiver 1, I'm thinking like 800 yards, something like that. Nothing crazy.
Yeah. It's not going to be usurp, besmirch. Here's my tuition payment for the English class. Hey, Corey, chill out. I'll say Chipotle however I want. I'll say.
Hey, you said it right.
Oh, well, now Chipotle. There we go. That's better.
Chipotle.
There, that's how us Midwesterners say it.
Chipotle, at least.
Chipotle. No, that's all wrong. But yeah, there we go. Yeah, I guess I'll move along into my second pick here. And that's going to be Alec Pierce talking about another Indianapolis Colt, or prefacing another, I should say. But again, I go to the question, do I want this guy on my team? And the answer is a resounding no. And that's not because I'm scared of Adonai Mitchell. it's because he was wide receiver 73 in points per game last year. He was wide receiver 61 in points per game his rookie year. Not good. And added competition from A.D. Mitchell doesn't help. He's low on the targets pecking order, in my opinion. Last year was the number 3 option. I don't expect that to improve. I went on a whole tangent last week talking with Noah about the wide receiver 3 option, or the third receiving option in wide receiver land, does not usually stack up good in fantasy points. And I think that's where Alec Pierce is. Then I get to the question, can I trade him away? I don't think so. Unlikely. If I can, it's for anything worthwhile. I don't think so. Maybe you're getting to improve a few picks in a rookie draft, or upgrading late round picks in the future. That 7th round swap we talked about with the Miles Sanders trade might get you somewhere. But other than that, I'm thinking it's a guy you're throwing into a deal to get him off your roster for someone else to end up cutting as opposed to you. But for me, likely a high priority cut candidate with minimal fantasy implication in the future. Another guy I don't think you're going to have a lot of regrets about cutting.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, anything to add here, Nate? I know you like Alec Pierce for what he is in the NFL.
Yeah, I don't have any interest in Alec Pierce fantasy-wise, but I think he does not get respected for being one of the better go route runners. I mean, he can run a 9 route really well, and you go over to reception perception, and they give him the green on that route and like no other routes. But he is really successful at that one route. So he's a field stretcher. That's what he did in college. That's what he does for the Colts. He's good at that. He's going to probably stick around on an NFL roster for a good couple more years. But for fantasy football, especially with Adonai Mitchell coming in, now he drops down to the wide receiver 4, even in a smaller role for that team. Yeah, I don't think he's going to make you regret it.
Yeah. Zach, anything else to add on this one before we move along?
Just sad, because I did like Alec Pierce, man.
Yeah,
the film out of Cincinnati was so interesting. It was it was a player I hadn't really looked at before. I think you guys had started to talk about him in January and February, and then I started to watch a little bit more, and it was very exciting. And I thought it was a great landing spot for him. And yeah, for just whatever reason, and for it appears that he just really struggles to get open. He's kind of just a downfield threat. And yeah, now there's just so many more mouths to feed. You mentioned Adonai Mitchell, of course, Michael Pittman, of course, someone else we'll talk about later. But yeah, just kind of disappointing with Alec Pierce. Who? No, just kidding. Yeah, it's I agree with you, man. It's and this is somebody I moved off after this season. Kind of moved off in the middle of last season because you could just see the writing on the wall with how that was going, just not really being targeted. 1-2 targets a game. Very disappointing, very sad. But yeah, you can't be emotional about these things. You got to move on.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And some guys just get pigeonholed, and it's, hey, you're really good at this one thing, and that's what you're going to do for our offense. And hey, that's okay. We just have to adjust for fantasy's sake, because if we don't, we get left holding the bag on guys that at one point, Alec Pierce was probably going in the late 2nd round of rookie drafts, in that range. I know I had a couple shares at one point. I think I've dumped those shares one way or another, but as somebody who was relatively decent valued, I think he was, going a little earlier and could have moved off maybe earlier at some point, but it is what it is. Real quick before we move along, if you want help with your roster getting into the season, we do roster review options here. If you are interested in a roster review, having myself, Nate, Mike, or Zach possibly look at your roster, check out the options to do so below. See what we can do for your fantasy team, and we take an in-depth look, peeling things apart and providing players to build around, trade target option, trades we put together, so on and so forth. So check that out if you haven't already. If you are interested, in the YouTube description box or the pinned comment of every video, it's there as well. So if you ever get that itch on a payday, whenever it is, that's a great way to support the brand, help yourself out, and we can do all that. So before we move along, I did have one question I want to go back to from good old buddy Mr. 1-2. Any optimism of Chase Brown breaking into the top 24 of running backs? I don't know if I'd be super comfortable putting him there for a dynasty perspective, but I think for a 1-year snapshot, the Cincinnati Bengals running back position has been good. Granted, it's been Joe Mixon the last 7 or 8 years, or however god awfully long it's been. I don't think it's been that long, but It's been Joe Mixon. That spot has been good. It's a good offense for fantasy for the most part, especially when Joe Burrow is healthy. Granted, Jake Browning held it down pretty well last year too. Any optimism for Chase Brown? I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm not buying him at that price though, and I don't think you have to. Nate, let's kick it to you first.
Yeah, not super optimistic.
Okay.
I think there is a potential for Chase Brown to be like somewhere between RB15 and RB24. But I think he's more so probably in that 20 range. So maybe he just clips that top 24, but I'm not like putting him there at this point. If I had to throw a number out there, probably like RB28, so like right outside the top 24. And it's not that I don't like Chase Brown, but I think Zach Moss is a significant piece of competition in that backfield. I think this is just a backfield that's going to have touches split between the two players. And if Chase Brown gets the majority of the receptions, that's obviously going to boost him up. But if Zach Moss is getting the touchdowns on the ground, it's going to even out. So I'm interested to see how this plays out, because if it goes one direction more so than the other, whoever that is could have a big season, a big one season. But, at this point, I think Chase Brown is sitting right outside the top 24, maybe just into it. But there's other running backs with better situations he's going to have to jump in front of.
Fair enough. Zach, any additional thoughts here on Chase Brown for Mr. 1-2 before we get to his super chat? Thank you very much again, Mr. 1-2. Zach, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the ceiling, right? RB24, it's probably the best you can hope for. While I don't think that Zach Moss is the clear-cut running back one in that situation, I do think that he is there, and he's going to be a part of the offensive game plan at some point or another. We don't know if it's, Chase Brown getting the bulk of the work and Zach Moss complementing, or vice versa. I do think it is Chase Brown. There is going to be somebody else there taking away work from him. So RB24 is probably the ceiling. It's not what I would aim for. He's not somebody I'm aiming to have as one of my two starting running backs, as most formats are in fantasy. He's somebody I'd like to have on the bench, or a flex fill-in, or a bye week fill-in, or an injury week fill-in. Not somebody I'm relying to be a top two running back for any of my fantasy teams.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. He should be somebody that you're factoring in as a running back for flex piece as needed, and buy him. You're not buying him at running back 2 prices. So that's something to keep in mind too. You get to buy him with pretty much just upside. At this point, in my opinion, or as close to just upside as you can get. Obviously, the wheels can fall off the bus very quickly. But Mr. 1-2 chiming in here again. Roschon Johnson, keep trade cut scenario here. To me, feels like a glorified handcuff to DeAndre Swift at this point. They just paid him a boatload of money, as much as they did just draft Roschon Johnson with relatively good draft capital. Things change quick for Roschon Johnson here. Anything to add, boys, on this one?
He's a keep for me. I think there is, Herbert's still there, but I think Roschon Johnson could absolutely be the RB2. So definitely going to still hold on to him.
Sure. I agree.
I think Herbert's the RB2 there. So I would also keep him, but if I could move him to somebody who's interested and I could get something for him, maybe next year. I don't know. Herbert's a free agent after this year. Maybe that's the plan. But I think Herbert can do a little bit more than what Roschon can do at this point in their careers.
Man, I don't agree. I don't think with that assessment of.
Well, what did we see last year? The Bears put Khalil Herbert on the field more than Roschon Johnson. So. Yeah,
and Roschon Johnson was hurt at the start of the year and a rookie.
And then you still saw Deonta Foreman and Khalil Herbert more than Roschon Johnson.
Yeah, like I said, I just don't agree that I think he can do more at this point.
I'm just going off what the Bears told me last year.
Yeah, and then, they immediately replaced both of them with DeAndre Swift. So I'll go what they're telling me right now. And what they decided to do last year, drafting Roschon Johnson with better draft capital, looking at the long-term situation. So Roschon Johnson, I'll keep him because I think, you're not trading him for anything. Cutting him, you're just kind of anything you invested at this point is kind of lost. You can stick him on a taxi squad, maybe trade him to the DeAndre Swift manager, maybe swap handcuffs or swap backfield monopolies, whatever the case is. Something along those lines is where I'd be at with Roschon Johnson for sure.
Well, Bob, I've got a share of Roschon Johnson in the league with you. Send me an offer.
I'm not going to do that. You had your chance. And you blew it.
I did.
So sucks to suck, I guess. Moving along here, I've lost track of where we're at. I think we're up to the top of the order with Nate's last pick here.
Time for my last pick here, and that is Greg Dortch, Arizona Cardinals wide receiver, currently rostered in 59% of sleeper leagues, all 5'7" of Greg Dortch. Look, last year, he only had 281 yards. Like, the overall numbers don't look great. Remember, that offense was not great to start the season. Kyler Murray did not play for the first half of the season. Over the second half of the season, things look better for Greg Dortch. Over the final 7 games of the season, he had 279 yards. So those final games when Kyler Murray was back, he was back and healthy as well. We saw him put up similar kind of numbers to what he did in 2022 when he got more volume as well. And just to kind of compare 2022 to 2023, his reception percentage, so the amount of targets that he caught last year was 63%. The year before that, with a fully healthy Kyler Murray, 81%. He is the starting slot wide receiver right now for the Arizona Cardinals. They got Marvin Harrison Jr. They got Michael Wilson, who I know Zack likes. They just brought in Zay Jones, but Zay Jones, I think, is more of a competition for Michael Wilson than Greg Dortch. Greg Dortch is going to be the starting slot wide receiver for this team. And with a healthy Kyler Murray, I don't think Greg Dortch is going to go out there and have a wide receiver top 24 season, but I think Greg Dortch, if you play in a deeper league, 25 to 30 roster spots, probably closer to 30, I think Greg Dortch is someone you should absolutely have on your team, because I think there's going to be weeks where you want to start him. If it's Michael Wilson or Zay Jones who are injured and Greg Dortch is the wide receiver too, Trey McBride's obviously there, but Greg Dortch has been really productive in the times that he's been on the field before, even just this past year. 3 games in that 7-game stretch with at least 7 targets or more. And in 2022, when we saw a bit more run from him, he had 3 games with 10 or more targets. So he is a guy that can handle volume. We've seen it over multiple seasons now in flashes. So not someone I'm looking to cut right now. Like I said, he's available in 41% of leagues. So if you're in a deeper league, I would definitely consider Greg Dortch as maybe like your wide receiver 10.
There you go. I think I do have some interest in deeper formats and deeper leagues. As much as I don't love, what could be the third receiving option in this offense, obviously behind Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride are the 1 and 2. There's no debate there. Greg Dortch could factor in to be a little higher, and like you said, I think Zay Jones is competition for Michael Wilson. Zay Jones, not too long ago, just a year ago, was a wide receiver 3 in fantasy. So I'm not saying it's going to happen again, but yeah, I'm interested in holding Greg Dortch and maybe, hey, kicking the tires, seeing if he is available in some leagues, because he might just not be getting the respect for the opportunity he may be able to get. And in deeper leagues, if it's a start 8, I'm probably not super
not worried about it. Yeah, but also I don't think he is someone that no one's interested in at all. So like, if I could sell him for a 3rd round pick, even next year's 3rd round pick, I would do that as well. I take the value.
Sell him for a 27 3rd right now. Zack, anything to add on Greg Dortch?
Yeah, it is a very interesting name. This is a player. This is like the Devin Singletary of wide receivers. Just won't go away, right? Was relevant last year when we didn't really think he would be, right? Really came into, wasn't really stepping on the field at all to start the season. You're like, oh, Greg Dortch is dead. It's dead. And then you look at the second half of the season, 69% of the snaps, 65. Obviously, there was some injuries there. Michael Wilson missed some time at the end of the season. They didn't really have a top wide receiver target there. But it's a very interesting hold because you're projecting this offense to be much better. And again, we're asking ourselves, is there opportunity for this player? And 100% there is. Whether he has the slot job to himself or whether he's splitting that. Zay Jones the last 2 years spent about 25% of his snaps at the slot. So Michael Wilson last year spent about 20% of his time at the slot. So maybe whoever doesn't win that wide receiver 2 job splits it with Greg Dortch. So there absolutely is opportunity for Greg Dortch. So it's a very interesting pick by Nate that I don't think a lot of people really have on their radar.
Yeah, and something else to throw out there, another reason I wanted to talk about him is because remember, the Cardinals did trade away Rondale Moore, who was his main competition for the slot.
Yep, 100%. What's the minimum, coming in from Jay here, question in the comments, what's the minimum you'd sell Greg Dortch for, Nate?
The minimum, I think someone said like 2 fourths. I'd trade him for a early fourth this year. I don't know if I'd trade him for a fourth next year. I'd probably just rather hold on to him, see if I can move him for a third in season at that point.
Sure.
So if I'm going to move on with a future pick, a third, otherwise I go down to like the 4 or 5 something probably, depending on who's on the board.
For sure. We do have a super chat coming in from Waffles. Kind of like a personal brand question. Love getting these. If you guys want to drop these, feel free. We're pretty much open books here. But Waffles are coming in with it might be a dumb question considering the channel name, which is Dynasty Rewind, if you haven't heard. But do y'all do redraft content in season or Devy around college season? Redraft, we're trying to do, or like in season, we're trying to do something a little different going into the year. We're still going to be dynasty focused. It's still going to be a thing, but we're trying to do some stuff that's a little more synonymous with redraft, kind of like you could watch it and it's helpful for redraft players or dynasty players. Like we'll still talk some values. We'll still talk some, this year stuff, but we're trying to do a little bit of both a little bit. So keep an eye out for that. Devy, I don't know if we'll do a ton of like Devy specific stuff, but we're always looking ahead at next year's class, maybe not weekly or anything like that yet, but we are definitely trying to, rope together some rankings here and there, rope together future drafts, etc. But I don't know, Devy specific.
More so on the Patreon, in the Discord and the
yes.
Patreon bonus podcast than on the channel.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great spot to get everything in the Discord. We have our own categories for redraft season or in-season chats where we're talking about, waivers, how to prioritize that sort of thing, how to, there's even some betting channels. If that's your vibe, that's your thing. We have some honestly really good bettors in there. Tailed on a lot of bets and made a good bit of cash. But if that's your thing, if it's not, but redraft, that's a great way to get in on that. And Devy, we are always, there's a lot of us with an eye on 2025 already, and even some in 2026, because we got some sickos out there in the Discord. But hey, it's a great community, and we want you to be a part of it. So thank you, Waffle Hauser, for that brand question. I love answering those and getting those in. And then we got one from my pal Tom Sobieski. Longer fantasy and NFL value, Michael Mayer or Jake Ferguson, and the odd man out, what is his trade value? What are we thinking here with this one, boys? Do we think that, would we rather have Michael Mayer and, maybe sell Jake Ferguson now for more? Because I think you're selling Jake Ferguson for a heck of a lot more than you're selling Michael Mayer. And that thought process right there leads me to believe or think, what is your other tight end option? Because if this is your tight end 2 or 3 to begin with, and you're competitive, I probably want Jake Ferguson. But if you're just purely looking long-term value, I'd sell Jake Ferguson for something that will give me more value than I think he might have in the long term. Because I'm not sold on Jake Ferguson being the tight end answer there, because they just keep bringing in bodies and they keep producing with Dak. Not that I think they're all that great, but I'll kick this to you guys now that I've talked about it for 2 minutes. But Zack, I'll kick this one to you first. Which would you rather have now? Which one do you think has a longer fantasy or NFL value? What are you doing with the odd man out? Trade value wise, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I don't know how the answer is not keep Jake Ferguson here. Whether or not he's a product of the system over in Dallas, the fact
what about
of the
now?
matter. What do you mean? What about now? Yeah,
with Kincaid and Bowers are my other tight ends.
I'd rather keep Ferguson. If that's the question, who would I rather keep and trade? I'd rather keep Ferguson. I realize that whether or not those are your other tight ends, like that's the player. What's the scoring format too? Is this like a 2-point tight end? Because if that's a 2-point tight end, you can start Ferguson and Kincaid and another tight end. To me, this is a top 10 tight end that's not going anywhere, that's not losing opportunity. If anything, he's gaining opportunity because, as we talked about with Jalen Tolbert, they didn't bring anybody else into that. Like we're talking about like Ryan Flournoy or some random dudes that they're bringing off
Brandon
the street
Cooks.
But he was there.
He
was already there. Those guys were already there. I think that
and you're thinking Brandon Cooks is going to be better this year. We talked about this in last.
I did hear that, yeah.
Yeah, but I think that there is, there's not going to be as much focus on the run game because what are they going to do? They're going to trot out Ezekiel Elliott and Rico Dowdle out there to be the main focuses on the running back attack. No,
Zeke, yes.
Jake Ferguson, top 10 tight end, Still got 2 years on a very cheap rookie contract, which if they keep Dak is what they're going to be trying to do. If they're going to pay Dak $60 million, they're going to have cheap labor, and Jake Ferguson is that for 2 more years. So I'll go with that over Michael Mayer, who just right now, there's just no opportunity for Michael Mayer. Do I necessarily believe that his value is completely in the tank? No, but it's incredibly tough right now to try and sell Michael Mayer to someone. So, you can make that argument. Yeah, keep Michael Mayer because you can't sell him. Trade Ferguson because, he has that kind of – he has that. But I would prefer in this situation regardless to keep Jake Ferguson. We've seen tight ends, get hurt before in the past. We also saw, we didn't get the ascension from Dalton Kincaid that we saw, that we expected last year. Maybe that's happening this year. I don't know. The offense that's there in Buffalo is kind of a spread it all around kind of an offense with Joe Brady. So for me, I'm keeping Jake Ferguson.
I just could not disagree more. Knowing that these are the 2 tight ends we have, you get to handcuff Michael Mayer. You just said tight ends get hurt. If Brock Bowers gets hurt, you have his replacement. And
you still have a better tight end if he gets hurt than Jake Ferguson than Michael Mayer. He scored 250 fantasy points last year. What are you doing?
I'm going to
tight end premium.
I'm gonna come in here and just say that I am a big fan of Jake Ferguson, but if you have Kincaid and Bowers, make the rest of your team better. Move on from Jake Ferguson. Make the rest of your team better.
Not if it was a tight end premium, I wouldn't disagree. But it's not a tight end premium. Kincaid and Bauer are the other 2 tight ends. You can sell Ferguson for something, and like Nate said, help out the rest of your team. Pair him with somebody else to tier up at wide receiver, even to help out a team that doesn't have a tight end. I don't disagree that Jake Ferguson's a better option to have, but with the context around the situation, you don't need 3 tight ends that are startable. So
believe me, I have plenty of rosters where I have 3 startable tight ends. I don't need them. I like them. They look pretty, but I don't need them.
Yeah.
If the situation is we're dealing Jake Ferguson because he's the more valued tight end, then why aren't we dealing Brock Bowers? He's the more valuable tight end.
Because
you can get a lot more for Brock Bowers than you can for Jake Ferguson.
Because Bowers is better than Ferguson.
But the opportunity there with the quarterback situation with Michael Mayer there.
Yeah,
I got Brock Bowers is going to score more fantasy points than. Hold on. Are we saying that Brock Bowers is going to score more fantasy points than Jake Ferguson this year?
He could. He's a lot more efficient.
I don't think so at all.
I would not be surprised.
I would be very surprised. Jake Ferguson plays in a way better, highly functioning offense. We talked about the Raiders. What I think is the Raiders' plan this year. It's going to be 13 to 10 games, run the ball. They're not going to be a high-powered, a high-scoring offense. It's going to be one of the more slower offenses in the NFL this year. Try and beat them up, be very physical, and I just don't see this team having a high offensive output.
All right. I'll agree to disagree heartily. And with that said, Zach, you got a tight end to talk about here who is
oh boy.
You're doing something with for some reason. What do you got?
By the way, when did tight end handcuffs become a thing? Like, why aren't we trading for Dawson Knox there, by the way, too? I mean, if
we do, speaking of which, since that topic came up, I was starting to like Marcos, and then he goes and mouths off this stuff. Are you kidding? Knox is the true tight end one.
Let's go, Marcos.
I could, from a positional standpoint, he might be because he might play more traditional tight end inline stuff, but scoring wise, it's Dalton Kincaid without any hesitation. But with that said, Zach, enough hesitation. What is your pick here for whatever reason? Yeah. What do you got?
I've been preparing myself for this all night. Let me let you in on a little secret. Come closer, guys.
No.
I am a sucker for the off-season workout videos. Okay? I'm a sucker.
I was going to say.
Sucker. I'm such a sucker. I hate myself for it, but I can't quit it. It's like, my giant red flag is off-season workout videos. And damn, Jelani Woods looks so good in those off-season workout videos. Dude, I don't know what it is, man. He is a freak of nature, right? Missed the entire season last year due to hamstring injuries, a.k.a. Greg Dulcich 2.0. But when I look at the situation, Kylan Granson and Will Mallory are not better than Jelani Woods.
Weren't you cutting Greg Dulcich like a couple weeks ago, and now you're saying
Well, no. I'm not comparing these two guys. I'm just saying with the hamstring injuries, they're very comparable because that's what happened to Jelani Woods last year. A recurring hamstring injury. I go back to Jelani Woods coming out a couple years ago in the draft. He ranked first in the ACC in touchdowns, first in the ACC in yards for tight ends, third in the class in total of missed tackles, ninth in the class in terms of PFF receiving grade, and ninth in the class in total ADOT. This is like all receivers, not just tight ends. Physical specimen, red zone target, midfield monster. And I'm looking at that offense and I'm saying Michael Pittman, Adonai Mitchell. There's an opportunity for a tight end that we didn't really see last year. And we did get Kylan Granson last year and Will Mallory and Alec Ogletree last year because they were looking for somebody to fill that void. Jelani Woods is a tight end 1 in this offense. And the reason that I'm very interested in Jelani Woods is because he's a free agent in some leagues, man. Go to some of your leagues and you will see Jelani Woods is a free agent in a couple of your leagues. I picked him up this last week because I saw workout videos and I'm like, oh man, I'm in love, baby. Look, I think that I'm not going to categorize him as a breakout, but we saw a couple years ago, 25 catches, 312 yards, 12.5 yards per target, 3 touchdowns. That was 2 years ago. Obviously, you didn't see anything last year. But I'm looking at Anthony Richardson, who's going to need some guys to throw the ball to. Jelani Woods is that tight end for the Indianapolis Colts right now. We were unsure how that situation was going to develop in the offseason. We thought maybe Brock Bowers was going there. That is 6'7", 253. Watch the workout videos and tell me you're not going like this, all right?
Jelani Woods, I've heard some good things about Jelani Woods from the Colts coaching staff so far this offseason. They're very excited about him, and they're very excited about if he has some healthy hamstrings. But even if he does have healthy hamstrings, and maybe he's been doing the same thing that Christian Watson's been doing, I don't know. You're still talking about the 5th target on the team after Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, probably Adonai Mitchell, maybe Jonathan Taylor. I don't think Jelani Woods is out there dominating for 80 targets in a season unless we really do have a breakout in our hands. I like Jelani Woods. I liked him coming out of college because of the athleticism, the size, the combo there. It was really fun. But if you're in a deep league, 35 roster spots, our new C2C startup, yes, you should definitely have Jelani Woods on your roster. Otherwise, I might wait for a little bit more news to come out of training camp before I really buy in.
You might miss out, Nate.
I might.
That's okay.
I might. That's okay. I have 5 tight ends on every roster I have, so it'll be okay.
Yeah. Hey, I'm good. I think my biggest question mark is the whole target competition that is there. So I don't know. Just because he's an athletic freak doesn't mean I'd put him up there, with this, Downs is going to get targets. Michael Pittman's going to get a boatload of targets. I couldn't do it personally. I'm not about it. But hey, if you got him, whatever, I guess. I'm not gonna fault him. He should probably be rostered in deeper-ish leagues.
He should be. He should be.
But either which way. Speaking of which, we did have a question that is going to lead me into my next point. Currently suffering from can't cut bums-itis, L-itis. I'm a grown man asking for permission to cut Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore in a 10-team Superflex PPR start 11, 32-man roster. Please set me free of this illness. That's what I'm here to do, at least with Kadarius Toney, and still 66% rostered. Lord knows why I can't do it, but do I want him on my roster? I said some things here that, amounts to no, but is much more vulgar than that. And why is the question? He isn't any good. I flash back to Happy Gilmore for all of you Adam Sandler fans out there, if there are any. I know I am. But that whole he's talking to his girlfriend about how he's going to play hockey. And she's like, well, there's one problem. You aren't any good. And that's the same thing I have to say to Kadarius Toney at this point. He isn't any good, can't stay healthy. He's done nothing for 3 years between health issues, lack of production. Why is he still on anybody's roster? Why are we holding out hope for Kadarius Toney at this point? And then I ask myself, can I trade him away for anything? And my answer in my head is, God, I hope not. But if I have him, thankfully, looking at Fantasy Calc, I've only seen him move for 4th and 5th round picks, which, to be frank, is still too much. If you're buying Kadarius Toney, if you can get out on that, by all means. And then we always talk about the whole thing with rookie picks of, when you're selling, earlier picks, especially for proven commodities, you could have Nico Collins instead of Rome Odunze. And, Rome Odunze could be Nico Collins, but Nico Collins is the boat, not the mystery box. And this is the one where we know the boat sucks. So we'd rather just take a shot with the mystery box at this point. So just kind of the inverse of that old Family Guy reference. But also some other deals. It looks like he was moved to improve a couple picks in later rounds, which is a great use of any roster clogger. If you're trying to get anybody off your roster, make some room, use them to help you target priority later round players in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, just to get that little bit up in your draft where you're not having to, well, I really want this guy and my list is pretty short right now. Can I move this guy? I'd really prefer to cut anyway and just use it to extrapolate some value so you don't miss out on players you want. You can do that with future picks as well, moving 5ths for 4ths, 4ths for 3rds in some cases, whatever the case is. Maybe even to just move up a year. Maybe you move a 5th for a 5th, but the 1/5 is in 25, the one is in 24, something along those lines, just to get yourself some picks sooner, so they can be a little bit more valuable sooner. That's how I'm trying to get some of these guys off my roster. I don't want to keep anybody today. I was a man on a mission with my cuts today. But boys, anything to add to Kadarius Toney on this one?
No, I've been out for a while. So
yeah, I can't believe people are still in. And Sky Moore, both of them. Anybody who is not Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, Marquise Brown,
or Travis Kelce.
Or Jared Wiley. Stop it. Or Jared Wiley. I'm in on Jared Wiley. I like this film enough. And, Travis Kelce's going to fall off a heck of a lot sooner than, at least by the time he does, Noah Gray probably still won't be contracted at least. So it can't be Noah Gray.
Yeah.
Is the thought process at least. But either which way, definitely want to move on from those guys. Some questions before we get out of here. Who is everyone handcuffing their Breece Hall shares with?
Saw a tweet today that one of the beat reporters says that Braylon Allen should be the guy.
That would be my guess too. I think he's, I don't know, best in my book. Surprised to see him go day 3. Sucks to see him go to a situation like this where it's like, sorry, dude, there's no chance you are getting any run over him at this point. But Zach, any addition? Who are you handcuffing your Breece Hall shares with?
That's a tough one. By the way, I saw another tweet today that said Isaiah Davis looked so good, and that Israel Abanikanda should be concerned because they brought Tariq Cohen in. So who the hell knows, right? I mean, can any of us give you an answer on that? I appreciate the question, but they have made it so confusing that who the hell even knows? You thought you could handcuff Michael Carter to him, then they brought in someone else. Like, you just don't know. You don't know. Like, Breece Hall is so good. You're not replicating that kind of production if he's injured. It's not a handcuff I'm seeking out, although sure. Braylon Allen was so interesting prior to the NFL draft. So if I had to go with one, just based off talent alone, I'd go Braylon Allen. But I have no idea how that running back room shakes out after Breece Hall.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Allen chiming in super late, probably, behind watching his roster review I sent over to him late last evening. Hey, if you want a roster review, check out the pinned comment or YouTube description box below. But either which way, I think we're going to kind of start rounding it out here. I'll go through some questions. If you, this is kind of the last call, so to speak. If you want to get a question in, now's the time to super chat it up. I'll putz through here and see if I can find some. What are you guys trying to, Nate, what are you trying to do in your leagues right now? What are you trying to do while I look for a question?
Let me just answer a question that was directed towards me.
Oh, sure. There you go.
Bowers or Ladd McConkey. No tight end premium until 2025, which would be a 0.5 tight end premium. Unless you have Dalton Kincaid and Jake Ferguson as your tight ends currently, I'm going to go Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers he is that stud. He's going to be a top 5 tight end for many, many years to come. As much as I love Ladd McConkey, the advantage that I think Brock Bowers is going to give you at the tight end position is just too much to pass on. He's in that top tier where we've had like that top 8, top 9 at times. Lad McConkey's just outside of that. So Brock Bowers, even without the tight end premium this year.
Fair enough. I like it. We did have a super chat come in from Matt Parker. Thank you very much. Guaranteeing his question getting answered here. Took over a team and a 12-team full PPR Superflex tight end premium start 11. Thank you so much as well for including all the formatting. That really helped us make our decisions. But our only assets right now are Brock Purdy, Bo Nix, Jamar Chase, Jalen Polk, and Dalton Kincaid. And we have 225 first-round picks. Should I move Jamar Chase for younger talent to diversify a little bit here? What are your guys' thoughts on this one? Should we move Jamar Chase? In my opinion, off the rip, I'm thinking, yeah, if we're in a rebuild, or it looks like it's an orphan team, I can only assume. I have to assume took over a team, so that means orphan, Bob. But I would definitely be looking into it. What are your guys' thoughts? Zach, do you want to chime in on this one first?
Yeah, I'd be looking into it, but I would not just set my mind on absolutely moving Jamar Chase. It's so early in the off season too. You've got a lot of time to make that move. Teams are going to tend to be a little bit more, I don't want to say desperate, but in need of talent and points at the start of the season, even a few weeks in when things go awry. And at that point, you will have a little bit of a better idea of what you're trading for. Right now, you trade Jamar Chase, which is a certified stud. What you get back in return, you might think it's a stud, but it could be a dud. You don't know. So maybe wait until the beginning of the season, a couple weeks in. You see some of these players, you see some of these rookies. Maybe you can downgrade from Jamar Chase to throw anybody in there. Lad McConkey, Roma Dunze, and pick up a little bit more on the top of that. So I would look into it. I wouldn't set my mind dead set on it, and I probably wouldn't be doing it right now. I'd be doing it when teams are a little bit more there's a little bit more of a hot seat in order to make moves.
Sure. Yeah, you also get better value on the 25 first at that point. While it's a while away, they just saw what draft picks went for. They just saw what first rounders are valued at. So 25 first round picks right now are still a little more valued than they're going to be, a couple weeks into the season.
Yeah, I like the approach there, Zach, putting it out there and not being like, hey, this is going to happen, but saying and exploring, hey, I'm interested in moving this player at the right cost. I highly recommend not solely chasing draft capital. One of the things I discussed in a recent video, we've done over 200 roster reviews, by the way. So shout out us and shout out you guys for supporting us that much enough to do that many. But over the course of time, we've done over 200. And one of the things I picked up along the way is that moving players for just draft capital, while draft capital is so exciting, puts a lot of strain on your roster because we don't know how those picks are going to pan out. We don't know where those picks are going to end up. We don't know how those picks are going to be valued down the stretch. And obviously, one of the things we love to do is suggest trading rookie picks at their peak value for proven commodities. We've done a ton of videos on that this year. Check those out if you haven't yet. But that is one of the things we recommend. If you're going to do this, sell wisely. Don't just sell just to sell. But I want to sell Chase at peak value, and I think you're doing that in season when teams are at that point of maybe making an aggressive push to compete and try to, make their all-in moves that hopefully mortgage their entire future. So you get a bunch of value on whatever picks and all that. But yeah, so 100%, I'm in agreement. Matt Parker, thank you very much for the super chat and the support. But
by the way, Bob, he did update and say that it's a complete rebuild.
Yep. I threw it on there. So complete rebuild. It's ugly. I'd be looking to move Chase once Kincaid is popping off. I'm probably still holding him honestly in the tight end premium, despite being able to get a ton for him. But I'm not married to any of these players. At the end of the day, if somebody's going to come knock down your door with a big boy offer and send 3 firsts for a guy or multiple firsts that seem decent, or ideally players and firsts, something along those lines. In these types of deals, in these tough rebuilds, ugly rosters, you got to be ready, willing, and able to do anything to claw your team back from the brink and get yourself in better shape. So anything else to add on that one, boys, before we kind of head on out of here.
I will say, if it is a complete rebuild and you need higher draft capital, moving Jamar Chase at some point only helps your own draft pick be a little bit higher. You're getting rid of those points. Maybe you can wait for an injury to a bigger player, acquire that player. You pick up that player. That. You do not pick up their points, but you pick up their talent a year from now, and you can pick up more on top of that. So if it's a complete rebuild, you need talent, you need draft capital, as Bob said. I would probably wait for a big injury. Wait for an injury to, last year there was Justin Jefferson was injured, Mark Andrews was injured, a quarterback, any of those players that will lose significant value because of an injury, but they'll be right back there in a year. Look at Kyler Murray. You could have bought Kyler Murray so cheap for the last, 15 months. And now he's, a couple games into the season, he's going to be another top 12 pick like he was before his injury. So that's something I would entertain there.
Yeah. 100%. And with all that said, guys, I think we're going to work on getting the heck out of here. If any super chats come in while I'm saying goodbye or while we're saying goodbye, definitely want to shout out, hey, becoming a patron today, checking out the Patreon Discord, get a free 7-day trial, tons of bonus content in there, bonus podcasts. Zach has one, Nate, you and Mike contribute to one. I don't do any, but it is what it is. I apologize. I'm chilling in the Discord a ton. If you want to come, bother me, I'm in there a ton. So that's a great way to get in touch with us and see what we can do to help you build up your roster more and more as we get creep closer and closer to the season. See what we along with that entire group chat community behind us can do. And all in all, thank you guys so much for watching. Leaving a like, commenting is the easiest way to support this channel. There are so many ways to support. Tuning in every day is an awesome way to do it. We love you for it. There are other ways. If you ever want to go deeper with us, there's plenty, super chat's an option, becoming a patron, as I just mentioned, picking up a roster review, purchasing one of the strategy guides. We have a rookie draft guide out there too. If you haven't had your rookie draft yet, we also have a bunch of trusted partners, a little punch bowl of trusted partners, I guess, whatever you want to call it. But there's plenty of ways to support the channel. If you want to do so, Nate, Zach, anything to add before we get on out here? We do have a super chat. For Mr. 1-2, thanks guys. As Nate is back from my fave place, Viva Mujeres. Mujeres. Ooh, that sounds way cooler than the way I said it. That's that Midwesterner in me. Bob the Rebuilder. Yes. When I was workshopping names, when I first got into this business, we'll get into a little soap opera here, and then I'll let you guys close out like I've been meaning to for the last 5 minutes. But when I was, getting into doing names when I first started, I ended up doing Bob Van, the IDP man. That was my thing for a long time. Bob the Dynasty Builder was in the cards at one point. A playoff of Bob the Builder, obviously. So yeah, there's a little fun fact that nobody ever cares about or wants to hear about, but Marcos, thank you as well for tuning in. Tom Sobieski, Nate Canada, that's you, I guess. So, but boys, feel free to say your goodbyes. Anything you want to add, any advice you want to give getting on into the season? What do you think?
Well, just appreciate everybody being here. I love that we're doing these streams more, doing more lives. And if you guys continue to be here, we'll keep doing them.
Yep. Zach?
3 live streams this month.
How about it?
Bravo, Bob. Bravo. Pat yourself on the back, man.
I'm not going to do that, but that is okay. As I've said, there are so many ways to support. We appreciate everything you do and anything you do. Check out the Discord, see what we can do for your team. But with that said, we're going to get the heck on out of here, and we will see you in the next one. But until then, I hope that y'all have a good one.